Welcome to yet another episode of PrivacyCast. In this podcast series, we bring together some brightest minds of privacy cyber to discuss topics at the forefront. Right today, we're going to talk about DPDPA. We are talking about DPDPA a lot since our last sessions. We did one with Arya, then we did with Supratim, and now we are getting more technical down the line and having even deeper conversations. Right. So if you're with me, let's just go ahead for 15 more minutes and you'll get a lot of insight and information about data privacy law and some dating apps, right? That's the goal of the session today. So I have with me Nikhil Narendran, partner at Trilegal. He's works at the Bangalore office as SME in TMT, technology, media, and telecom. He also is the secretary at iTech Law. Also wrote an amazing book. If you guys find time, find it. It's Responsible AI, a global policy framework, right? So Nikhil, over to you for a short introduction. Though I have introduced you, but over to you also for just a few lines to our listeners.
Thank you, Akash. It's very nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I practice at the intersection of law and technology. I've been doing that for over 16 years. I work on intersection of technology with human lives and commerce, the way I'd like to put it. And data is a very important part of that journey. With every service or apps that we use, gathering a lot of data about us. The new bill is all about giving us a lot of autonomy and rights, which did not exist in the past. So really excited to be here and talk about the scenarios that you have highlighted.
Nikhil, I think great to have you here, by the way. And as I have repeatedly said, right, a lot of friends in the industry kind of recommended that we should do a session with you and let people hear from you. So I think today is the day. So I think one thing that all the individuals today, I think dating has become, though we want to talk about the privacy law of India, right, the DPDPA Act, but somehow I see that kids young, and I'm also young by the way. So just adding on to my, so a lot of people are talking about privacy law, right? So the DPDPA is there. Let's say the deadline also comes. So how does dating get affected, right? Dating apps that are there like Tinder, Bumble. I though my girlfriend may be hearing this, but I don't. I'm not on those apps, right? So just saying, like, I don't know. Like maybe how does those companies have to comply to DPDPA? What do they have to do now? How does it change for a user like not like me, but like my friends? Yeah. So
Yeah, so I think your friends and a lot of my friends, and first of all, I need to tell you that I left the dating scene and got married just when Tinder was becoming popular. So I did not obviously get to enjoy a lot with respect to Tinder. But I am a lawyer who tries out every product that comes in. So I've also used Tinder, right? Technically, even after I was married to figure it out. Bumble didn't look like that different, so I obviously didn't try it. And of course, now if my wife catches me with the Bumble, it's going to be difficult. Now, what's going to be different is, I'm talking purely from the experience of, you being a Tinder user a long time back and also advising some of the companies who work on matrimony and dating apps. The way it's going to really work is now it's going to give a lot of autonomy to the user with respect to deletion, erasure requests. For instance, it's likely that a lot of your fairly sensitive information is lying with some of these apps. So unless these apps did not take these rights seriously, you never had a right to go back and ask for deletion of those data, right? Unless these apps did not have easy to access compliance mechanism, it is going to be difficult for you to even figure out what data that you have. Now you're going to have control over that, which will ensure that, look, after let's say an episode and you just want to move on from a Tinder or a Bumble, it's your opportunity. You can completely erase the data, subject to the fact that they may keep some data for their law enforcement purposes.
so basically, asking again from my friend's perspective, right? So if they have to
Asking for a
now,
friend.
yeah, friends. So if let's say I am on Tinder now, right? If I just go and download Tinder, I can go back to Tinder and ask them to delete my data, right? Now I have that, as you mentioned, I have a human right as an Indian citizen, right? An Indian people in somebody in the Indian diaspora, I have the right to get my data deleted from Tinder. So the Tinder has to forget. But my question to you also is, can it forget everything? Because right to deletion, to what extent is it going to be practiced, right?
Again, so let me also answer this for a friend, and not from your perspective. Let's say that your friend is on Tinder, and he, it's likely that there will be some conversation exchange with someone on Tinder, right? And it is likely that there could be other obligations on Tinder as an intermediary, as someone who provides a safe place online for people to interact and sort of meet each other. They are bound by other rules to keep the data. For instance, intermediary obligations have certain data retention rules, right? Which is to ensure that your friend, while he or she is on the platform, is not sending certain kinds of pictures on Tinder, right? Which could be illegal, which could be offending, right? And if they did, they're supposed to keep they won't check whether you actually are sending those pictures. They might just keep a backup of this information for a 180-day period, or some case 2 years, some case 3 years, depending on the retention requirement, and they keep those data. Similarly, they may also keep data with respect to, they have earned some money from you, which means that they need to know who the user is, right? So they may keep some data for 5 years for money laundering.
Not be forgotten.
So those kind of data will not be forgotten. They won't delete those data.
So my friend should not buy Tinder Gold. Then his data can be forgotten if, let's say, he spends 180 days after, let's say, there's 180-day intermediary guidelines. If those kind of cross, then his data will get automatic, which is in the backup.
I wouldn't go to that extent. And the reason why I won't go to that extent is because of the fact that, let's say that he bought Tinder Gold, right? Tinder will delete everything except his payment card information, right? I mean, or the fact that there was an invoice, right? They will delete his swipe right and swipe left after 180 period. So the data that Tinder can keep is only with respect to payments. So they can't just keep your swipe rights and swipe left for the purpose of income tax records or money laundering obligations. So your friend can definitely purchase a Tinder Gold. In fact, I'll advise him to do that as
well. Gold should not be a barrier, right? And let's talk about more human rights, right, in privacy, right? I think it's an amazing concept. People don't know about it. So privacy law just passed, Nikhil, right? But I still, when I talk to my mom, I talk to my friends, right? And I keep telling them, hey, you know what? We are so excited. Our business is going to grow. They're like, what has changed? Nothing has, right? Though I am happy that my sales is increasing, right? So I'm, again, just from a, honest perspective, but from my mother's perspective, nothing has changed. But for my friend who want privacy at this age, my mother doesn't want privacy. I think all her friends, they're the fastest data transfer models, right? Like my cousins, and so, but my friend, right, would like some privacy, right? Would like some privacy on what he says, what he talks, because our generation needs it, and we got it. So what rights do we have? We have right to deletion, we have right to grievance redressal, we have right to access, and we have right to change. Yeah, that changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can access the
now
data.
When I look at
what data is what data has been processed about you, and then ask for correction of those data, right? And in case there is a breach which happens, then we have a right to be notified, right? So look, I think the only different perspective that I'll put in is, look, I'm someone who believes that the concept of privacy is very different from across different generations, right? So look, you walk up to someone in my generation and sort of ask a woman what her age is. She might proudly declare her age, but if you did that 20 years back, she wouldn't, right? For different reasons, because it was, some say it's a patriarchy-driven concept that you should never ask women an age, right? So it changes. So my understanding of privacy, the way I look at privacy, is that privacy is a very personal and interpersonal subject, which means that not only is it personal, what is private to you may not be private to me, the specific category of information. It is also interpersonal in the sense that I can decide to be private and share some information with your friend, right, on Tinder, but I may not want to do that with you, right? So it's entirely likely, it's entirely possible. So in that sense, I think the concept changes. It has different meanings, even geographically, even generationally, even community-wise. It's got a different meaning. And look, all I say is, look, it's possible for a man who travels in an S-class to have a very different concept of privacy, as opposed to someone who's taking bath on the road right next to him in near a slum in Bombay, right? They could have two very different kinds of concepts of privacy.
Yeah. Suppose you're discussing data compliance, with AI giants, right? Open AI, the Padosi AI, cousin AI. There's so many AIs, right? Everybody's an AI today, and everybody has scraped all the data on internet, right? Every other guy who's building, everybody I have talked to who was building AI, already scraped, right? LinkedIn AI. There is so many AI attention back. But question is, how do they use the data after DPDPA? DPDPA just passed. Now, if I again build up AI company, how is it different from 3 months back when there was no privacy law?
So it's a very interesting question, right? So essentially, if someone was scraping Indian data, it was already a sort of an issue under 43 of the IT Act, which means that if you do not get the permission to scrape data from a website, so for instance, if it's a publicly available website, you could scrape data without any permission. But if the website had a restriction, either by way of a technological restriction, if that is circumvented by using RPA processes or otherwise, or using other scraping tools and capture breaking and whatnot, then that's an offense under IT Act, and which means that that's source of data itself is colored, right? Now with the DPDP, what's happening right now is that it clearly says that publicly available information, there is the Act does not apply, provided that it the information per se, that personal information that's been accessed or scraped, should be put out by the user itself. So, which means that if I'm a data principal, I voluntarily put my data out. For instance, Trilegal website, my name is there, my email ID is there, my mobile number is there. Someone can use that data. I can no longer say that that's protected under the DPDPA. And if AI algorithm scraps that data, I can no longer say that, look, that's a violation of my privacy. But let's say if there is another data which is not put out by myself, but let's say put out by Akarsh, right? For instance, I did not give you my consent on this podcast, right? Let's assume that you cheated me into doing some sort of a video with you, and that video is out there. And it's not happening. I'm just hypothetical situations that we're talking about. If my information is online and I did not give consent to my information being online, the AI algorithm cannot scrap it. Now, how do you verify it from a compliance perspective? That's going to be extremely difficult, right? So the way to do this is, look, this is just not a problem for AI algorithms, but that's where it will be hit the most, the way things are working right now. But they will have to be very sure and clear about the source of data and figure out if there is actually the source of data is a colored source of data, or is it a non-colored source of data. If it's a colored source of data, then the best way is to not process that information, because there will be further dissemination of information. Even if they put in place a filter, it will be very difficult for them to stop it. So filters are very effective when it comes to stopping IP infringement from using AI algorithms, LLMs. But filters are not very effective when it comes to personal information, because it's very difficult to figure out what is actually personal and where it actually originated from.
And that's how all the AI companies and OpenAI is trying to fight back, right? Saying that it's very difficult. If we have to grow technology, then we cannot. What do we do? And I mean, there's so many interesting things happening, especially with data. Everybody's trying to make sense or use PII, but it is beautiful, right? I kind of keep saying that this is a beautiful, right? This is beautiful field altogether, because I'm getting and Nikhil, I have a question. All my friends are asking me this. So every time I tell them that the privacy law in India is passing, and I want to ask you this, right? They ask me the next question. They said, क्या मुझे बैंक के कॉल आना बंद हो जाएंगे? Like, will I stop getting these bank calls, right? So I had to ask you this here. So what's your take on?
So look, I think that really depends on the enforcement, right? So for instance, if you, I will find it extremely difficult, right? Because of the fact that, my number is already out there on my website to stop somebody. But if your number is not there in somebody's, some website, then you have an opportunity to stop it. You just need to find the right lawyer to fight your case, and you can start making those changes. So I'm someone who believes that it's possible to make those changes. And if we take the right approach by using the law as the right tool to get your rights enforced, then you have an opportunity to stop the bank's spam calls. I mean, not just banks. I mean, everyone. I get more trouble from insurance companies and real estate companies rather than from banks. But it's the same case everywhere. Also, it's just not a privacy issue. It's also a telecoms issue. I think telecoms issue, as they've tried to solve it from a telecom angle, never worked. Now with the privacy angle as well, probably both together could give us a solution where at least the number of spam calls could be reduced.
But I have a question for you, for my listeners, right? They all, my people also, ask me, right? People who we are serving, right? They ask me, how do we become successful in a privacy career, right? And I have my answer, but I want to hear from you. Like, how does somebody, become successful? And since you are a lawyer, right, and a partner at one of the biggest law firms, right, most amazing law firms in India, right? So, how does somebody become, let's say, a privacy law firm partner down the line? I think that's the
I have no clue because I started doing this was when this was not really attractive or people did not even understand what I was doing. So so people used to make fun of me as to why I did not pursue corporate law, right? So I started doing this when this was just not interesting or so I really don't know how to do this now. I've done this and I know how I have done this, which is probably the secret to becoming successful in any profession or business, which is to really put your head down and work and assimilate every possible piece of information that comes your way. And though 10,000 is not a scientific number, but that sort of rule works. You dedicate you know so many years into doing something, you naturally become an expert. And then you need to realize that you're an expert, right? And don't get hide yourself and behind an imposter syndrome. And then once you realize that, you become a successful professional. That's the way to go about it.
see 10,000 hours into privacy and not hiding yourself after 5,000 hours to 10,000 hours. Then you become
Also, you need to
famous.
realize that after you spend that much time, right? If you're able to go through that grind and still people are coming to you, then you're really worth it. Right? You cannot be a complete novice after 5,000 years. Then the 5,000 hours. Then 10,000 is
Yeah,
5 years.
10,000 is 5 years, right? So 2 to 5 years, guys. Nikhil, believes, and I believe that if you spend 2 to 5 years just doing privacy, you'll become an expert and you'll do amazing in this field. And thank you, Nikhil, for joining the podcast, for your lovely words and the discussion about my friend, right? Not about, not us, right? It's about the friend who wants to use dating apps and still be private. And one of the best podcasts that, I have had a discussion with, and I didn't know how the time went by. Thank you. And would you like to say something to our listeners before you
No, I think it
finish?
was fantastic. Really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you so much. Look forward to coming back again, Anush.